Hi guys, it's Ms. Herrera. Welcome to my read-along. This is for day one. We'll be reading Plantation and Slavery on page 332 through 337, which is one of your attachments. You can go ahead and read along with me, or you can read it on your own. The attachment will be provided with day one assignment. Thank you. All right, so let's get started. The title of this section is Plantation and Slavery Spread, and you can see that the main idea here is that the invention, the cotton gin, which is an invention we talked about last week, and the demand for cotton caused slavery to spread in the South. And why does it matter now? The spread of slavery created lasting racial and sectional tension. So to this day, many people can easily argue that African Americans are not seen as equal in our society, and a lot of it has to do because of the stigma of slavery. So let's begin one American story. Catherine Bell was born into slavery in 1838 at the age of 91. In 1929, she recalled her childhood on a Virginia plantation. When she asked what games she had played, Catherine replied that enslaved children never played games. They were too busy with chores. Among the tasks were picking and cleaning cotton. And this is a voice from a past, and usually the voices from the past are direct quotes from some of the people. So here's what this is something that was quoted. We had to work in the field in the day and at night. We had to pick out the seed before we went to bed. And when we had to clean the wool. We had to pick the burrs, the sticks out of it would be clean and could be carded and spun and wove. Catherine had to clean cotton by hand because the plantation didn't have a cotton gin. This machine made it easier for enslaved workers to clean cotton, but it also made cotton growing and slave owning more profitable. That means that you can make more money out of it. In this section, you will learn how slavery expanded in the South and how it affected the lives of the people living under it. The cotton boom. Eli Whitney invented a machine for cleaning cotton in 1793. After visiting the Georgia plantation of Catherine Greene, the widow of a Revolutionary War general, Mrs. Greene was struggling to make her plantation profitable. English textile mills had created a huge demand for cotton, but the short fibered cotton that grew in most parts of the South was hard to clean by hand. A worker could clean just 1 pound of this cotton in a day. Whitney's cotton gin, short for engine, made the cotton cleaning process far more effective. With the new machine, one worker could now clean as much as 50 pounds of cotton a day. The cotton gin helped set the South on a different course and of development from the North. So on the side of the page here, you can see that I wrote that cotton was hard to clean because the fibers would wrap around the seed. Also, part of the leaves and some of the little pieces of the plant would get stuck on the cotton. So it took a long time to clean the cotton so that it would be ready to be sold. And as you can tell, one slave, it would take him an entire day to do 1 pound, while the machine is going to do 50. That's a big difference. So if you look here, you're going to see the picture of the cotton gin, and you could clearly see the steps that it would take for the cotton gin to work. The hand crank, number one on the top, had a series of rollers, and then the roller with the wire teeth pulls the cotton through the slots too narrow for the seeds. The cotton seeds fall to the hopper, and a roller with brushes removes and cleans the cotton from the first roller. So you would throw in the cotton the way it was, and this machine is going to clean it. And again, it's going to be a lot more faster than human hands. It's going to do the job of 50 slaves. So it's going to become really good for them. So let's talk about the reading now. So let's continue. So it made short fiber cotton a commercial product and changed Southern life in four important ways. So these are the effects of the cotton gin. 1. It triggered a vast move westward. Cotton farming moved beyond the Atlantic coast states where long fiber, easy to grow cotton grew. Cotton plantations began to spread into northern Florida, Alabama, Mississippi. Then they crossed into Louisiana and Arkansas. After 1840, they reached Texas. 2. Because cotton was valuable, planters grew more cotton rather than other goods, and cotton exports increased. 3. More Native Americans groups were driven off southern land as it was taken over for cotton plantation. So that's going to be one very sad effect also, not only slavery, but they're going to start pretty much kicking out Native Americans from their land. 4, and we talked a little bit about that 2 weeks ago with Tecumseh. Number 4, growing cotton required a large workforce, and slavery continued to be important as a source of labor. Many slaves from the east were sold south and west to new cotton plantations. Let's look. Slavery expands. So as you can see, because of the demand, you're going to see an increase on slavery. From 1790 to 1860, cotton production rose greatly. So did the number of enslaved people in the South. Using slave labor, the South raised millions of bales of cotton each year for textile mills in England and the American Northeast. Last week we talked about factories, and a lot of those factories needed that cotton. So them unwillingly or maybe knowing, they're also contributing to the increase of slaves because they need the cotton for their factories. And as a result, where are they going to buy it? They're going to buy it from the South, who uses slaves to grow the cotton. In 1820, the South earned $22 million from cotton exports. By the late 1830s, earnings from cotton exports were nearly 10 times greater, close to $200 million. So as you can see, the increase of profit, the increase of money, the increase of production is going to demand more slaves. As cotton earnings rose, so did the prices of slaves. A male-filled hand sold for $300 in 1790s. And by the late 1800s, the price had jumped, and we're going to read about it in the next page. So what is very clear is that as there's more demand for cotton in the factories, and there's more money to be made, slavery will definitely here grow. In this page, I want you to look at the map for a little while. You could see that on the south, the area that is in yellow is the area where cotton is being grown. And as you can see, it's a vast territory. It's a large amount of land to be being used just solely for cotton. Also, if you look at the chart next to it, the one that reads cotton production 1800 to 1860, you could see how the growing of cotton starts off very slow, and then and thanks to the invention of cotton gin and then the demand of factories, not only in England as before, but also now in North America and the northern states, you see that the amount of bales of cotton have increased tremendously. So you see it how much from less than 500,000 to over almost around 4 million bales of cotton are now being produced. Okay, so let's go with the reading. So by the late 1800s, the price had jumped to $1,000. After 1808, when it became illegal to import Africans for use as slaves, the trading of slaves already in the country increased. So in 1808, most of the world banned slavery and the transcontinental trade of slavery. That means shipping slave from one country and crossing the ocean to bring it to America was illegal. But the United States did not make it illegal for to continue to sell slaves within the country itself. So we couldn't buy slaves from other countries or no longer get them from Africa, but we could buy the slaves that we already and sell the slaves we already had and their children, which is really sad, but that's what was happening here in America. The expansion of slavery had a major impact on the South's economy, but its effects on the people living there were even greater. So slavery divides the South. Slavery divided white Southerners into those who held slaves and those who did not. Slaveholders with large plantations were the wealthiest and more powerful people in the South, but they were relatively few in number. Only about one third of white families owned slaves in 1840. Of these slaves owning families, only about one tenth had large plantations with 20 or more slaves. So again, it's only going to be the real rich that have more than 20 slaves. Most people, if they're lucky, they'll have one, but a good amount of white Americans will not. Continue the next paragraph. Most white Southern farmers owned few or no slaves, still many supported slavery anyway. They worked their small farms themselves and hoped to buy slaves someday, which would allow them to raise more cotton and earn more money. For both small farmers and large planters, slavery had become necessary for increasing profits. So you're going to see that even if they didn't have slaves, they're going to be in favor of slaves, which is really sad. Part of it is going to be, yes, because they're hoping one day to be able to purchase them and for them to have money themselves. And another reason that's not mentioned in the book, but it's often seen, is that it makes them, in a weird way, feel better, that they're better than another group of people, in this case, the slaves. African Americans in the South. Slavery also divided black Southerners into those who were enslaved and those who were free. So, not every single person that was black in America was a slave. We did have some free black people, especially in the North. Enslaved African Americans formed about one third of the South's population in 1840. About half of them worked in large plantations with white overseers. Decades later, former slave described the routine in an interview. The overseer was a straddler, his big horse at 3 o'clock in the morning, roosting the hands off to the field. The rows was a mile long, and no matter how much grass, weeds was in them, if you left one sprig on your row, they beat you nearly to death. Wes Brady quoted in Remembering Slavery. Not all slaves faced the backbreaking conditions of plantations. In cities, enslaved persons worked as domestic servants, that's working in the home, as skilled craftsmen, factory hands, and day laborers. Sometimes they were hired out and allowed to keep part of their earnings. Frederick Douglass, an African American speaker and publisher, once commented, "A city slave is almost a freeman compared to the slave on the plantation, but they were still enslaved." In 1840, about 8% of African Americans in the South were free. They had either been born free, been freed by an owner, or bought their own freedom. Many free Americans in the South lived in cities such as Baltimore and Washington, D.C. Though not enslaved, free blacks faced many problems. Some states made them leave once they gained their freedom. Most states did not permit them to vote or receive an education. Many employers refused to hire them, but their biggest threat was the possibility of being captured and sold into slavery. So this is going to be a real threat because it was happening on occasion. They would recapture free blacks and sell them into slavery, and people would buy them. Finding strength in religion. An African American culture had emerged on the plantations by the early 1800s. Slaves relied on that culture with its strong religious convictions, close personal bonds, and abundance of music to help them endure the brutal conditions of plantation life. Some slaveholders tried to use religion to make slaves accept their treatment. White ministers read such as Bible passages as "Servants, obey your masters," but enslaved people took their own message from the Bible. They were practically inspired by the story of Moses leading the Hebrews out of bondage in Egypt. Enslaved people expressed their religious beliefs in spirituals, religious folk songs. Spirituals often contain coded messages about a planned escape or an owner's unexpected return. African American spirituals later influenced blues, jazz, and other forms of American music. As you can see also on the daily life, it shows one of the spirituals here. I'm not going to sing it because believe me, you don't want to hear me sing or try to sing. But in the book later on, if you're interested, you could see some of it's, dear Lord. So it's crying out to God and it's asking for peace and and better days. So they are quite inspiring. Families under slavery. Perhaps the cruelest part of slavery was the sale of family members away from one another. Although some slaveholders would not part mothers from children, many did, causing unforgettable grief. When enslaved people ran away, it was often to escape separation or to see family again. When slave families could manage to be together, they took comfort in their family life. They married, though their marriages were not legally recognized. They tried to raise children despite interference from owners. Most slave children lived with their mothers, who tried to protect them from punishment. Parents who lived on other plantations often stole away to visit their children, even at the cost of a whipping. Frederick Douglass recalled a visit from his mother, who lived 12 miles away. I do not recollect or remember ever seeing my mother by the light of day. She was with me in the night. She would lie down with me and get me to sleep, but long before I waked, she was gone. Douglas's mother resisted slavery by the simple act of visiting her child. Douglas later rebelled by escaping to the north. Other enslaved people rebelled in more violent ways. And then here we have a picture of how when they're being sold off, they were often separated because they were sold to different owners. So take time to look at this picture very well. Look how they're dressed at that time, what they're doing. This is a slave auction, so here's where they sell off the slaves, and you can see there's many buyers trying to purchase the slaves that are being sold there, and they're looking, I'm sure, whether they're getting a good price and who are the slaves that are being sold. And some of them, of course, will get separated, and you can see the agony on the slaves' faces. Slave rebellions. Armed rebellion was an extreme form of resistance to slavery. Gabriel Prosser planned an attack on Richmond, Virginia in 1800. In 1822, Denmark Vesey planned a revolt in Charleston, South Carolina. Both plots were betrayed and the leaders were hanged. So as you can see, it's not going to be like people are just going to be sitting around and accepting slavery. There are going to be people creating rebellions, but unfortunately they're often caught and hung. The most famous rebellion was led by Nat Turner in Virginia in 1831. On August 21, Turner and 70 followers killed 55 white men, women, and children. Later witnesses claim that he spoke these words: "We do not go forth for the sake of blood or carnage. Remember that ours is not a war for robbery. It is a struggle for freedom." So, in other words, in this quote, he's saying, look, we're not doing this for the simple sake of stealing. We're not doing it to kill people. The reason that we're doing this struggle is for freedom. Most of Turner's men were captured when their ammunition ran out, and 16 were killed. When Turner was caught, he was tried and hanged. So this is going to be something that is very sad. What happens here is the fact that he ended up killing not only the men, but that he killed women and children is going to get the white people extremely upset and furious, and they're going to want revenge. So let's continue reading, and then you're going to see how they take revenge. So not only do they put him on trial and hang him, but there's other things. Turner's rebellion spread fear in the South. Whites killed more than 200 African Americans in revenge. So, as you can see here, they killed 55 white men, women, and children. And for revenge, they're going to end up killing, the white people are going to take the lives of 200 African Americans. State legislatures passed harsh laws that kept free blacks and slaves from having weapons or buying liquor. Slaves could not hold religious services unless whites were present. postmasters stopped delivering anti-slavery publications. So this is what they're going to do to try to stop that. Not only the revenge, but they're going to make strict laws. They're not going to allow them to have weapons. They're not going to allow them to buy alcohol. Um, Also now, they knew that when before they would let them meet for religious reasons on their own, and now white people are fearing that that's when they're planning their attacks. So as a result, they will no longer be allowed to have religious meetings on their own without being supervised by someone who was white. After Turner's rebellion, the grip of slavery grew even tighter in the South. Tensions over slavery increased between the South and the North, as you will see in the next section. So we'll talk about that. Let's quickly read America's history maker, Nat Turner, 1800 through 1831. So he died being 31 years young. So Nat Turner was born on a plantation in Virginia. As a child, Turner learned to read and write, which is something very rare. Most slaves did not know how to read and write. It was actually illegal for them to read and write. He became an enthusiastic reader of the Bible. Slaves gathered in forest clearings to listen to his powerful sermons. Turner believed that God wanted him to free the slaves, even by armed rebellion. He defended the justice of his cause in what came to be known as Confessions of Nat Turner, which he dedicated to a white lawyer before his execution. So you're going to see that Nat Turner, and later on, we're going to read about another abolitionist who was actually white, John Brown. They're going to believe that they're godly inspired, so they believe themselves to be prophets who are going to be leading these rebellions. Okay, guys, so we're done with the reading now. Your next step is to fill out this form, and that should be an attachment to the reading. And what you're going to need to do is explain the significance of some terms. And then I want you to chart the effects about each group from the Southerners. So I need you to find facts of non-slaveholding whites, enslaved blacks, slaveholding whites, and free blacks. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for joining me on this read along, and continue doing your work for the week. See you.